Hey there, I'm Yankel, and today I'm gonna show you how to make absolutely perfect boneless pork chops. And guess what? We're doing it from frozen. Pulling them straight out of the freezer. And we're gonna make them using a couple of ingredients you probably already have lying around your kitchen. But the first step is putting them into the sink in a bowl of cold running water. We don't actually need them to defrost very much. I just want the surface to be able to hold some salt and pepper. That's the key. And we want the water to continue to run. So once the bowl is full, we're gonna lower that to a trickle. And in the meantime, we're gonna get all of our cooking elements preheated. It's gonna save us some time down the road. So we're gonna head over to the counter. I've got my oven preheated to 325. Perfect temperature to keep those pork chops moist and tender. And we're gonna go with medium to high heat on the stovetop so we get a nice sear without burning. If you're using gas, start on high, drop it a notch. Same thing for electric ranges. Now, the key to keeping those pork chops juicy is adding a little bit of moisture to the pan once we've got a sear going. So I think our pork chops have been in the water long enough. Really, it takes about 2 minutes. So I'm gonna go grab them and then we're gonna start searing. After about 2 minutes in a bowl of cold running water, we have just enough give on the surface for those pork chops to hold some salt and pepper. So we're gonna take them out of the package, and here's the key to getting a really good sear. A dry surface. So I've got a paper towel ready. We're gonna go right onto that paper towel, and we're gonna blot that surface dry as well as possible. Any sort of moisture on the surface is gonna steam when it hits the pan, and we don't want steam, we want browning. I'm gonna season with coarse salt and pepper. Not all salts are created equal. Table salt is not great for seasoning meat. So we're using coarse kosher salt that has some texture, easy to feel, melts beautifully on the meat, and makes sure that every bite is gonna be delicious. And we're going with a healthy dose of salt. And then I always like to use fresh cracked black pepper because I think the flavor is fantastic. And I'm just gonna make sure that gets pressed in a little bit so that it sticks, because remember, these are pretty solid. Other side. Beautiful. Now, our pan is ready. See a little bit of smoke. The key to pan searing is making sure you're using the right oil. So I'm using a refined high temperature oil, in this case avocado. You can use any preference that you have, whether it's coconut oil or one of the corn oils, or even peanut oil if you like the flavor. Those all do well for high heat. Just make sure it's slightly refined. And now we're going directly into the pan with our pork chops. Once I put them in the pan, I'm gonna press down on the pork chops to make sure they have good contact with the surface of the pan. That's where the sear happens. And browning meat is really where you develop the flavor. So you never want to skip the browning process. We're going to let those sear on each side for about 2 minutes. Well, you can see those are starting to build up a beautiful crust. We have nice browning happening. We're building so much flavor in the pan right now. After 1 minute on the other side, it's time to add our secret ingredient, in this case, a vinaigrette that I had lying around. It has so much flavor. It's already got spices. It's already got moisture. So we're going to use that. And in this case, I'm using Italian, but you can use your favorite vinaigrette or whatever you have lying around. And we're going to go into the pan. One of the important parts of this puzzle is not adding your vinaigrette too early, because as soon as we add liquid to the pan, we stop the browning process. So we want to make sure we have a great sear on both sides, and then we add our vinaigrette. Well, we are ready to go into the oven. These chops are going to continue to absorb all of that delicious moisture while they cook. 325 for about 15 minutes. See you in a bit. I can definitely say that the two most common issues people have with pork is overcooking it and having it dry out. I have two great ways to combat that. Number one, a good digital thermometer. And number two, I temp it periodically while it's cooking. So we're about 10 minutes in, and we're just gonna double check. Pork is done at 145 degrees. And you know what? You really don't want it to go much past that temperature range, because that's when it tends to dry out. So we're at about 130, 135. That means about 3 or 4 more minutes, and then we're gonna let it rest, and it'll continue to cook while it rests. Pork chops are done. Now comes the most important step of all, resting. When you rest meat, it reabsorbs all of the juices, and we want a juicy bite. We want it to be moist and delicious. So we're gonna leave it in the liquid for about 8 minutes before we slice into it. Let's take a look at what we got. Now, they look absolutely beautiful. Remember, anytime you see a visible grain, you want to slice against it for maximum tenderness. Oh, those are beautiful, juicy, delicious, and you'll notice, even though they've rested for 8 minutes, there's steam rising off the center. That's because of carryover cooking. And that means that the meat continues to cook as it rests. So it's actually rising in temperature when it's sitting on your counter or in your pan. Those are so juicy. Look at that, fantastic. And you can see by the amount of moisture that's on the countertop, I could have actually let them rest a little bit longer. So remember, the longer you let them rest, the more juicy every bite's gonna be. And of course, you can serve it with rice, vegetables, whatever you prefer. Add a little of the vinaigrette to finish it off. Super easy meal. It's gonna come out perfect every time. Use your cast iron pan, or really any pan, as long as you can get a nice brown sear. Throw it in the oven with your favorite vinaigrette. How easy is that? I'm Yankel. See you next time.